Hello, everybody. Lloyd, were you looking around for like, hey, where are those people coming from?
There's people clapping and I can't see them. It's very disorienting.
Yes, that's our audience out in the live chat, actually. Welcome to Talk Heathen. It is June 6th, 2021, and it is, as everybody should know, if they don't know already, June is Pride Month, which is why I am repping with my interesting makeup choices and the fabulous genderqueer flag that is behind me. Lloyd, I see you're not repping Pride. Interesting choice.
I am mentally repping it in my mind. There is a massive Pride flag. I just wish there was a way of bringing it onto the screen, but it's there. But no, what an important celebration, really, of this, of so many people, and the fact that love should just be love, and there shouldn't be so much hatred and so much lack of equality, and people just being made miserable over this crucial element of humanity. So I'm really glad that there is pride, and to the extent I can, I certainly try and play my part in spreading the word.
Well, thank you. And you have always been an awesome ally as long as I've known you, and I really appreciate that. If you don't know who Lloyd Evans is, he isn't just an awesome ally. He is also an awesome ex-Jehovah's Witness activist, and he is one of the people that I looked up to most when I was starting off in my channel and taking on a role as an ex-Jehovah's Witness activist as well. And I'm so happy to have you on the show. I am so privileged to be on the show with you today. So excited.
It's mutual. I draw so much inspiration from what you do as well, and I'm really. We have like a nucleus, don't we, of ex-Jehovah's Witness YouTube activists, and you've been forefront, I think, and I really admire what you do, and I'm so thrilled that you're now such a huge part of Talk Heathen, which, the ACA shows are such an important project, I think, in driving discourse and getting people talking to each other, and you're just the perfect fit for that. So I'm just glad to be your sidekick today.
Well, thank you. Never thought you'd be my sidekick. I was pretty comfortable with it being the other way around. But anyways, as Lloyd has mentioned, ACA is a really awesome organization, and if you want to support us, there's a number of ways you can do that. You could become a member by clicking the join button below this video, and you will become a member. Of course, YouTube will get a cut of that, so if you don't want YouTube to get some of your money, you could support us on Patreon at patreon.com/talkheathen-to-me. It would be like a monthly pledge type of thing, and that's always a really cool way to support us. And of course, if for some reason you don't like the way my makeup looks today, we have a audio-only version of all the shows in podcast form at tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. Check that out. It's the full category, or the full catalog, not category, of all the shows in audio podcast form. If you'd like to continue the discussion after the show, you can join me and Lloyd after the show in ACD, which is the ACA's fan-run Discord server, and you can go there at tiny.cc/ACA Discord. And, of course, after the show, and hopefully if we finish on time after our Discord chat, there will be a new episode of The Nonprofits airing, which is great. I love The Nonprofits. It's a great show. I don't know who's on today. I probably should have found that out before the show, but oh well. You and I can both find out when The Nonprofits airs later today at youtube.com/thenonprofitsaca. So, with all of our announcements out of the way, Lloyd, do you want to get into some calls?
I was just thinking, as much as I was enjoying your announcements and your particular way of doing them, I would love a call.
All right, let's get into some calls. I try to just take whoever's been on the line the longest first.
What could go wrong?
Actually, before I take the phone call, I have been reminded that I do need to tease the audience. There is going to be a special announcement later on in the show, which I'm not announcing now, but just keep that in the back of your mind. There's going to be a special announcement later. Yes, very intriguing. All right, so let's take our first caller. Ashley has a neighbor who is studying with Jehovah's Witnesses and wants advice on how to talk to her. Ashley, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hi, Rudy and Lloyd. How are you?
Very well,
Awesome.
thank you.
Good. I'm a big fan of both of you. And I think I left a similar voicemail for you, Lloyd, before I knew you were going to be on this week. So disregard that. Don't know if I left my name. I'm so sorry about that.
He already started the
yeah,
video. Come on, Ashley. No, I'm just kidding.
I know. So to get to my question, I do have a neighbor and friend who I socialize with often, and she has revealed to me that she has been studying with the Jehovah's Witness Bible teacher. She seems pretty close with her, and it seems like more of an emotional draw, like the community and people to come over and visit a lot. So I've tried some light street epistemology with her, and she just seems kind of reluctant on the topic, which might. And she is aware I'm an atheist, which I didn't mean to let slip, and that could definitely hurt my cause. But overall, I just try to engage lightly, and it seems like a really sensitive topic for her. And I know her family and her husband are not supportive of it. So I'm really scared for her and what could happen depending on how far she goes down that path. I mean, she's still socializing with me, so she can't be that far, I suppose. But yeah. I'm just wondering your thoughts.
Yeah, if she still has worldly friends, she's not too far along yet.
That's a tricky one, isn't it? I guess what I tend to say is that, you know, there is no magic bullet when it comes to indoctrination. I mean, obviously, your neighbor is, it sounds like in the early stages. So we don't know to what extent your neighbor is indoctrinated or will be indoctrinated. So it's a little early, perhaps, to know for sure where this is going to go. All I will say is that Jehovah's Witness indoctrination, and Rudy knows all about this, is extremely potent. And it may seem incredibly far-fetched, you know, when you see the brochures with paradise filled with pandas and fruit tables, and this awaits everyone in the future. It seems far-fetched until you have invested time and emotion into it. And the more time, the more emotion, the more energy you invest into it, the more the sunk cost fallacy kicks in. And you think, well, I've come this far, I may as well see it through. If your neighbor is really serious about this and you are serious about helping your neighbor, I think it's just about keeping the lines of communication open. And even if you don't want to accept your own Bible study, you could always say to your neighbor, if you come across evidence that this is really the truth, I want to hear it. And then that's your kind of way for your neighbor to know that you're there and interested in hearing the arguments if your neighbor happens across anything that they consider to be persuasive. So they will then be looking at you as a potential convert as they get more and more indoctrinated. Now, it could end up that they don't end up getting more and more indoctrinated because they figure out for themselves that this is a load of nonsense. But at least if you're keeping those communication lines open, you're in a position where you can just introduce some critical thinking and introduce an outside perspective that could be helpful. But in the long run, this is an individual who's in control of their own lives. And if they decide to go ahead with this, unfortunately, there just isn't that much you can do apart from just be there as a friend.
My own take on this is, of course, everything that Lloyd said, absolutely. But something that always really affected me as an active witness was the persecution complex. It's very strong, and it's introduced to even studying Jehovah's Witnesses, because the witness who is teaching them the Bible will tell them that people will be opposed to them learning the truth. So if you come out guns blazing, they are not going to respond well, because it's just feeding into the narrative that they have been told about the world and how the world will react to them learning about and becoming a Jehovah's Witness. So I think making it clear that you don't have a problem with them, and you wouldn't like them any less if they were a Jehovah's Witness. Make that clear for sure, because that, you know, this sort of going against that narrative of the whole world being against you is part of what helped me to eventually get out. And just being able to see that, this thing that they are telling you about, oh, everyone's going to hate you and everybody will be opposed, it doesn't hold up. That is something that can sort of help break down that narrative. So maybe approach this person from the perspective of, like Lloyd said, if this is true, I want to know it too.
I want in on this, if it's really true,
Mm-hmm. But if you can deconstruct those arguments, because they are easy to deconstruct, then do so. But you are earnestly seeking the truth as they are. It just so happens that the witnesses don't have it.
Yeah, no, I love that point. I had been kind of comparing my love bombing to theirs, and knowing that and not that that's what I'm doing, but I'm just trying to be a good friend and spend time and let her know that I am here, and I don't have any negative opinion of her studying with this person. She talks about it to me, so I at least feel that maybe that line of communication is still open, but I definitely did not come from that position originally, which I definitely should. Please let me know what you're finding out, and be curious. I don't think I came with that correct. I probably came on too strong, and I mean, all I really said was I don't believe that, and I'm an atheist, but that sounds really strong to somebody who does have that persecution narrative given to them.
But it's hard.
And
it's hard not
I'm
to
judging her in a way.
It's hard not to come out strong when you know that somebody you care about is being actively indoctrinated into a cult. You have to resist the urge to just like shake them and be like, "Oh my God, wake up! You cannot fall for this, please."
This is also the first person I've known who was a Jehovah's Witness or was studying with them, because I did not grow up in an area where they were very visible. So it's kind of a shock to me after watching content like on Lloyd's channel and things like that. And I'm like, oh, if I ever met a Jehovah's Witness, how would I approach? And I try to be rational about it. And then when it happens, you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, that's a very understandable response. I actually had an ex-boyfriend in high school who became my ex because he tried to tell me that I was in a cult. He went on JW Facts when I started preaching to him, and he found out very quickly that I was sucked into something bad, and he tried to tell me so, and I basically told him to fuck off. Because, you can't just tell somebody who's in a cult that they're in a cult and expect them to believe you. That's how cult mind control works. Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you both for your
I hope
insight.
it works out.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Try and be a friend, and who knows, maybe you'll be able to help.
Yeah, and I would love it if you make some progress with your neighbor, that you would call us back and let us know how that went. I would be so interested in hearing. Or, of course, you can shoot us an email. Either way, I'd love to hear the follow-up.
Awesome. Definitely. Thank you both. Take care.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye, Ashley. Well, we started off strong.
That was a tricky one. Yeah. There's no easy answer, really. But all I can think of is just be kind. Just being kind and not being too aggressive or confrontational. You can go a long way with that, can't you?
Yeah, and that's not the first time I've been asked that question, and that's pretty much what it always comes down to for me too, is like, just let them know that the whole world is not against them, and that's already a pretty big step in the right direction. All right, let's see. Who would we like to take next? I always want to prioritize theist callers, so let's get John on the line. John is a new convert to religion who would like to talk about his beliefs. John, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. How's it going? Good morning.
Welcome,
Hello,
John.
how are you?
Thank you for calling in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you said you were a recent convert and you want to talk about what your beliefs. What did you convert from and to?
So I actually did not use the word recent convert myself, although that is that's a fairly good representation of me. I just growing up did not have a huge amount of religious influence in my life. Like, I'm a student. I've spent most of my life kind of learning about science, learning about, just trying to study the world in a way that's not religious, that's founded in reason, founded in logic. And I definitely don't want to lose sight of that. But through the past few years, I've had some deeply profound experiences that have affected me greatly, that I found religion through. And I've talked to a lot of my friends who are actually big fans of your show. I don't know if any of them are watching now, but shout out to them. But
yeah, shout out to John's friends.
And understandably, in a similar vein as your last call, they've had some concerns about my beliefs as they've seen me take on my beliefs. And part of what I'm trying to do as I get those beliefs and as I immerse myself in those beliefs voluntarily is to just try to maintain accountability and try to hold myself to a standard where I can still defend my beliefs to atheists. And I can still walk away from the conversation believing that I've put forward a logical argument.
When you say you've had profound experiences, are they profound when you describe them to other people, or are they just profound to you?
Yes, to the extent that a lot of the time people don't believe me, and a lot of what I found God through and what I found God for has just been getting through these experiences, not being able to talk about them, not being able to share them with people around me who'd probably be capable of helping me with them, but who just don't care, who just because of who I am, will not help me. And I've had to just, fix shit on my own, and God has helped me do that.
Dare I ask if you could describe these profound experiences for us?
That was going to be my next question too.
One thing I am hesitant about is at first I don't want to start off by getting too much into my own personal lives, because I do think that it impacts my credibility.
Granted, but you've called in and you've said you've pitched us on this on the basis that you started off not religious and you've become religious based on profound experiences. So please don't go all coy on us now and not tell us what the profound experiences are, because that gets us nowhere.
Because the point is that those arguments are. John,
my experience.
John, just a second. It's fine. I want to make this clear. We're not trying to force you to tell a story you don't want to tell us, but you said that the reason you converted was because of these profound experiences, not necessarily because of logical arguments.
Clarify.
Right? So if the logical arguments that you have now are not the reason you initially converted, then that was, at least at some point, that probably wasn't very convincing to you. So we want to know what did convince you.
Exactly. And I'm not trying to be dishonest here at all. I will absolutely answer any of your questions, describe my experiences as honestly as I can. I would just like to, just going into it, make it very clear that I'm not trying to claim that my experiences themselves are what convinced me of God. I don't think that any of you would be convinced if I told you that, all right, my life experience has convinced me of the reality of God, because that's not a convincing argument. All I'm saying is that
personal experience,
very privileged mindset where I haven't had to think about things like that. But then because of some experiences, because of some circumstances that surrounded me, I've had to learn to think differently. And in learning how to think differently, I've exposed myself to many, many, many new ideas. And God is one of the ones I'm holding on to. And I'm trying to hold on to it in a way that still is coherent and still is defensible, even independent of my experiences. Even if you didn't know who I was,
John,
I believe that my argument still holds true. But I will talk
John,
about
tell me if this is accurate. You did not convert because of your experiences directly. It isn't like A to B, but you've had experiences that made you think about things differently. And when you started thinking about things differently, God seemed like more plausible, or religion seemed more helpful, or something along those lines. Am I following you?
Exactly. Religion has been the most healthy way to organize my thoughts and achieve great things. And I believe that's why religion is so powerful, and that's why I think it sticks around. It's always going to stick around. Because it's a way for people who are similar to me and have been in probably worse circumstances than me to achieve greater things than I've ever been able to. And that's what God is. That's power. That's like the most powerful thing in the world.
Are we any closer to hearing what the experiences are? I'm waiting with bated breath here.
Yeah, I didn't mean to mislead you. I just didn't, it's for me.
You're all right. We have an hour and a half and quite a few callers, so we kind of want to be direct.
Let's not diddle. Yeah, I agree. So I'm a survivor of child abuse and child neglect, which
I'm sorry to hear that.
People are these days, but don't be sorry. It's just sort of been what I've had to do throughout my whole life. And for a while, I was actually doing very well with it. Despite being in a situation that wasn't great, I was very successful, and I was able to, fix things to the greatest extent that I could. And I don't want to misrepresent things either. I had a lot of help along the way. I wasn't like the worst person. I didn't have like the worst situation ever. But a few years ago, things just got pretty hard for me. I went from, I was in high school at the time working just like close to minimum wage jobs, and I started losing hours. I lost one of my jobs that I'd been relying on for, really consistent hours that had been great to me for a long time. I quit to pursue another job, and then that job was great, but I just wasn't getting the hours that I could rely upon. And at that point, my main expense was food. So when I had to start cutting back on expenses, I had to start cutting back on food.
John, can we summarize this part of the story with you went through some financial hardships?
Yeah, I ran out of food at some point, and it was bad. And I had to go to school and beg for food and stuff. And everybody's convinced that I'm crazy because of that, and I probably am crazy. But God helped me get it through. I don't know.
In what way did you feel that God helped you get through it?
I feel like I've had to get through it, and God's helped me find the strength within myself to do it. And not only to do it, not only to survive, to thrive in a way that most people can't say that they have, even if they've been given food.
Well, if the strength was in you, where does God come into it?
The strength is not within me. The strength is something that I can find within myself if I channel the right energy from the universe. I believe what I am is not... what I am is a box that's receptive to energies that's far higher, that are far higher than me. Like I'm living in space-time, but I'm being operated on by energies that go far beyond that.
John, far beyond. Real quick, I'm going to interject here because you feel that you could not have gotten that strength from yourself. Is that right?
I might have been able to, but even if I could, it would have been just it would have taken more work to get less strength for myself than God was able to give me.
How do you know that? If you don't think it's impossible that could have been done by yourself, how do you know that a God factored into it? And before you answer that, let me say, I've also been through some really tough times. And during those tough times, I was convinced that I was directly opposed to God the whole time. And I still made it through. I not only did I never ask God for help, I considered myself an enemy of God the whole time because I thought that I was being disobedient, and I thought that I was damned. I thought that I was not going to make it because I was in opposition to God's will for me. And I still came out the other side not only fine, but thriving. Like, my worst problem right now is a toothache. So why do you think that this couldn't have come from you? Why do you think that it had to be a God? Why is a God necessary in this when people all the time get through really rough stuff? And that's not to downplay your experiences at all. I fully acknowledge that that sounds like a very, very rough time. But why did a God have to be involved when people get through rough times without a God all the time?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't say that God has been with me the entire time. And I've spent a lot of my life in that exact same mindset that you've described. I've literally prayed to God, feeling like I'm Satan, praying to him for rescue, thinking that without him, I have no strength. And I think that, and I wouldn't put many of the choices that I've made, even trying to improve my situation, on God, because I don't think that they all are. I've had many, many plans, and many of them haven't worked. But the ones that have worked have, in my opinion, been rooted in God. And they've come to me when I put myself in a mindset where I'm receptive to God. So I wouldn't say that it's impossible to do any of the things that I've done without God. I think that I've had to do, them without God the whole time to an extent. And I think that everybody around me, everybody in the world is probably always dealing with harder things without God themselves. I'm not saying that that's hard for me to wrap my brain around. But what makes religion profound to me, and the reason that I'm so convinced of it, and the reason that that it's made such an impact on my life, is that I believe that with God is capable of amplifying the strength that you have within yourself anyway. Even if you're capable of maybe doing the things that you need to do, it's going to require so much more struggle to do all those things on your own. God's capable of doing that with less effort. When you're capable of doing certain
That sounds
things
like God is
with
depression
less effort,
medication.
that frees up other effort for you to take care of the people around you, so they don't have to do many of the things for them.
Can I give you my thoughts, John? John, can I just give you my thoughts, having listened to all of this? I don't know what your expectations were as to how this conversation would go when you called in.
Specific to discuss, but I apologize.
Well, we've discussed a lot already. We have listened to a lot, and I just want to give you my thoughts.
Fair enough.
So as Rudy pointed out, you've been through a lot. You've been through, it sounds like a traumatizing experience, and we would never wish to downplay that. But if your aim, if any part of your aim in calling Talk Heathen was to persuade us that God is real, or that religion is the way of navigating these issues, I'm sorry, you just haven't been convincing. And here's my main issue here. Whenever it boils down to, well, I've had these personal experiences, I've been through hardship, just when I thought I didn't have any energy left, hey, I got this massive gust of energy, I got replenished, and I was able to carry on, and I could never have carried on if it was in my own energy. I just keep thinking in the back of my mind, the Holocaust. 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. Coronavirus. 3.7 million people have died in the coronavirus. And where was God for them? Where was God for literally millions of people who have died, whether through war or through disease? I really shudder when I look back when I was religious, and I used to fantasize about God intervening in my life, in my insignificant life, in some insignificant way, to make just my life just that little bit better, while all of this death and misery was being allowed to continue. A God that folds his arms through the Holocaust is not a God I'm interested in worshipping. So if because of the trauma that you've had in your life, the idea of believing in a God gives you comfort, fantastic. Glad it works for you. But if your aim was to convince us or persuade us in the large amount of time we've afforded you, I'm really sad to say it just hasn't worked.
Yeah, and
I think that's fair enough. I appreciate your time. The one thing I would like to say, and I'm not trying to drag this out any longer than it is, that was specifically why I didn't want to spend too much time talking about my own experiences. I did mention that at the beginning of our conversation. I crafted what I believed would have been a convincing argument that was rooted in science that I'm still willing to make. But you've given me plenty of time, and I very much appreciate your time. I'm not trying
Thank you.
Well, if you want to call back with that argument some other time, you are absolutely welcome to do so, John.
I very well might. Thank you so much.
Yep. Bye. Yeah, John's version of God kind of sounds like the way that my depression medication works. Like, I know that I can do all that stuff, but I need a little boost to help me to get through it.
Does your medication come with strings attached so that you have to live by all sorts of rules if you want to?
I mean, I gotta pay for it. That's a string. Yeah, we didn't even really get into what his God concept was, which I also found interesting because it didn't seem to, at least the way he was describing it, it didn't seem to matter very like the specifics of the God didn't seem to necessarily have to factor in.
Yeah, I feel bad. I mean, if you're going to base it on personal experience, and I appreciate he said that he wasn't basing it on personal experience, but he did sort of lead with that.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to take that back after you've already.
It's kind of best to lead with the scientific stuff, really, yeah. and he didn't. So maybe if he does call back, he can lead with that. Yeah.
But as you know, as we pointed out, the scientific arguments and whatever isn't what initially convinced him, clearly. So
Exactly.
that doesn't really make even though it might be stronger as an argument for his own personal experience, it doesn't really make sense as a place to start. All right, let us go back to the callers. All right, we have another theist in the chat, Paul from the UK. Ooh, I'm gonna have 2 UK accents to listen to. Woohoo! Paul, can you hear us?
Yep.
All right, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing all right.
Excellent.
Dare I ask which part of the UK you're from?
England.
Okay, that narrows it down. Go ahead. How can we help you?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about. So I've called up before, and I talked about some sort of cosmological argument, and I kind of realized that both of the premises of pretty much all of the versions of the Kalam kind of rely on like infinities not being possible, whether it's an actual infinity or infinity by a successive addition. So I wanted to talk to you guys about whether it's possible for time to be infinite, maybe provide some reasons why I don't personally think that can be the case. I think
here's a question.
for me,
before we bounce into that, Paul, is the Kalam like the most convincing argument to you?
No. It's up there, but I think there's still other arguments that could probably do better.
Okay, then why are we talking about whether or not time is infinite to support or disprove the Kalam? If I mean, I'm not saying this is a pointless topic, but what I am saying is, if you've got better arguments and we have to go into all this wishy-washy, timey-wimey bullshit to parse out whether or not the Kalam is even a valid argument, then let's go straight for the arguments that are a little bit more hard-hitting. Like, I don't know. I've always felt like if you have to go this far out of your way to argue, and the Kalam doesn't even get you to like any specific god even, so it's kind of meh as far as arguments for God go.
It's just supposed to be an argument for to basically in support of theism, so it wouldn't necessarily prove Allah or Yahweh. It's not really what it's for specifically.
Yeah, and I understand that. I guess that that's one of the reasons that it's a pretty meh argument to me, is that even if I granted you literally the entire argument, which I don't, but even if I did, even if we skipped right to the end and said, sure, all of that is true, now what?
Well, then you would have a sort of transcendent cause, which is the conclusion, or one of the versions, probably one of the stronger versions of the Kalam.
Okay, if the Kalam is true, then there is possibly a deistic God that started everything off, first cause, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know if you're watching the screen, but
we can describe this God also.
I think the issue you have, Paul,
Yeah.
first of all, you've called on a week where the two hosts aren't really that bothered with philosophy, and you clearly are.
Yeah.
That's the main issue, the main elephant in the room. And the second thing is, you've also called on a week where the Talk Heathen is being hosted by 2 ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. And when people say religion to an ex-Jehovah's Witness, or specifically to us, it means a lot more. There are far more specific permutations than simply, oh, did the universe have an intelligent beginning? Is there a celestial intelligence behind the beginning of all things? It's far more specific than that for myself and Rudy. So we're not as interested in the journey, which I think is what you were saying, Rudy. We're more interested in where's the end product? Where is this going? What specifically do we need to do with our lives in light of any potential discovery that the universe has an intelligent beginning?
Right, because I have absolutely no investment in fighting the idea of a deistic God. I have absolutely no investment in that. If somebody could prove it to me, I'd be like, okay, like that's
Yeah.
All right. Like, you got to get more into the specifics.
Yeah, we could just go with a specific religion, perhaps Christianity, given your
What's your religion? I don't want to talk about somebody who's not in the room.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Then.
Any particular flavor of Christianity?
I'm non-denominational, so I don't really kind of look at that stuff.
Okay, so what is your concept of God then? I mean, I know that, you know, non-denominational is pretty vague. I just want to get into, you know, where we're going here.
Basically, maybe we could talk about evidence for the resurrection. It wasn't really what I planned to do, but I suppose I could just wing that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to throw off your whole reason for. It's just that, like Lloyd said, neither of us are super invested in philosophy, and in this argument in particular, it's like, I'm not super. I don't really give a shit either way if time could or could not be infinite. That's so. I'm way more interested in getting into
which
what
is not
your
to say that you can't
of,
be interested in all that. It's just that you've hardly
You've
looked
unfortunately
out.
gotten the two people who are not at all interested in that.
Yeah.
Call when J Mike is on. Call when J Mike is hosting, and you will have a wonderful philosophical discussion. But yeah, so you are a non-denominational Christian, and you believe that there's good evidence for the resurrection. That's a good place to start. Let's go from there.
Well, to be honest, the first thing I'd like to say is that considering how long ago this happened, I doubt anyone will ever be able to prove specifically that that Christ was resurrected, or even that to have definitive proof that he even died on the cross in the first place. I mean, obviously,
that's fair. That is a very, very specific event that happened supposedly to one person, like evidence of one specific person's death, and that person was not a king of some sort. It is pretty unlikely you're going to find hard archaeological evidence. That is fair. I will totally grant that.
Yeah. So I think that maybe one piece of evidence maybe that there was a resurrection was maybe the sightings of Jesus after his death, the empty tomb, maybe. It seems that these are two inductive pieces of evidence that we could posit to say maybe there was actually a resurrection.
Okay, well, where are you getting that information from? That there were sightings of Jesus after the fact, and that there was an empty tomb?
Well, some of the ancient Roman writers, I mean, for example, you have like Josephus, there's Flavius Tacitus, who I think they wrote about Jesus like within, I think Josephus was within 60 years of his death as well.
My understanding, and I could very easily be wrong, is that, I mean, like anybody who writes about Christianity will be writing about Jesus. That doesn't mean that they actually thought that Jesus was a real person, or that he was the Son of God, or that they are confirming specific rumors about what he did or did not do in life.
Yeah, well, to my knowledge, I believe that I think it was one of the two writers that I just mentioned, either Josephus or maybe Tacitus, that was referring to Jesus as that was the Jew that we just killed, and now everyone's saying that he's the Son of God, but he died, and basically they're talking about him in a very derogatory way, which would suggest that they aren't very biased towards him being the actual Messiah, and if anything, they would show a more negative viewpoint of him, which, in my opinion, and I think historically would make it more likely that what they were saying was accurate.
Right, but if that's all true, then all that says is that they put a guy named Jesus to death, and he had a lot of followers.
Yeah, but they're also okay. How do I put this? Because usually there are like three pieces of evidence. Usually it's the empty tomb, it's the writings of him, and the supposed rumors of his resurrection, and the sightings of his resurrection. To my knowledge, those are the only pieces of evidence that I know. I know it's a very shaky position to stand on alone, because obviously, you're essentially devoting your life to something, and
Right.
if you're looking purely at the historical evidence, there's not really that much, but it is a lot, considering if you were to check out any other random person who was crucified and died, thousands of years ago, you would find essentially nothing at all. So,
well, this person had a legend around them. Whether or not that legend is true is obviously still up for debate. But if Jesus was a famous person, like if Jesus was real and was a famous person and did some preaching and got a lot of followers, it's not. I mean, a whole religion sprouted up around this guy. It's not surprising that there would be people talking about it. I don't think that that's particularly. I mean, there are much more obscure figures in history who we can find random documents and tablets that talk a little bit about what they were up to, and they're not as significant as Jesus because Jesus started a religion. But I mean, I guess that my question is like you're right. This is pretty shaky ground to stand on alone, and I get that there is somewhat of a cumulative argument, but I don't. The problem is none of this all of this evidence could point to Jesus being a real, actual person, and there really was a religion that started up around him. What I'm not seeing from any of this evidence is evidence that he was raised from the dead, and even further, I'm not seeing any evidence that him being raised from the dead had anything to do with him being the Son of God. Even if you could prove that, that doesn't explain the origins of that.
Actually.
What'd you say? Sorry?
Many people say that, many people say that that because Lazarus was also raised from the dead, then surely you can say maybe Lazarus was like also a Messiah, because surely using something as arbitrary as rumors of a person's resurrection doesn't mean that they were a Messiah. But you have to look at the context that this person essentially says that I'm the Son of God, blah blah blah, and I am just this special person, and there are like hints, drops, and all over the place. And so when he dies and he resurrects, you have to realize that at this point, Christianity barely has existed for even 10 years, if at all. The Bible wasn't even in existence. The writings wouldn't be put together for ages after that. So it isn't like you can exactly rule out biblical recordings of him. And also the fact that these.
I would stop you right there, because I think that you can pretty easily rule out biblical recordings as far as how much research have you done into the origins of the four Gospels?
I've done enough to know that they are somewhat dubious, especially Matthew, I think, and there are a few others. I basically skimmed over, and I know that there is debate as to who authored the four Gospels, but regardless, it has even if you look at it from the worst point of view and say that all four of the Gospels, which I don't think many people say, people just say some of them, but all four of the Gospels are faked, or maybe have a different author from what's actually claimed. It still shares facts and evidence with the things that were already known about, and it shares facts.
Hold on a sec, because none of the books of the gospel claim to be written by the people who they are named after. That was ascribed much later by the church. I mean, it wasn't if you read those books, they don't claim to be written by the people whose names are put on them. So that in and of itself is...
And accounts from those people.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
I said it was supposed to be an account from those people. It's the Gospel according to Mark or Matthew.
But
that's the name they were given later.
They weren't written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those were assigned names. None of the actual Gospels purport to be written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And furthermore, they were written decades after the events purportedly happened by followers of Jesus, whose names we don't know. So that's probably an area in which finding out more about Bible scholarship might help you.
Speaking
Yeah,
of which,
definitely.
Paul, I'm really enjoying this conversation. We do have some other callers we have to get to, but if I could make a recommendation, I would love for you to pit these arguments that you have and these ideas that you have against another Paul that I know. There is a YouTube channel called Paulogia. It's like apologia, like apologetics, but his name is also Paul. So you can guess how that's spelled. And he is really, really great at breaking down the historical stuff. And he's responded to a lot of Christian apologists, and he has made his own videos on these topics. That is like the number one person coming to my head who I would love for you to check out some of his videos, and then maybe sort of call back, and maybe if you have like a very specific, like, okay, I disagree about this or about that, or I don't know. But I would love for you to check out his videos.
Yeah, I'll definitely give it a watch.
Yeah, I think that with the conversation we've had so far, if that's the kind of stuff that you find interesting, you would love those videos. They are really good.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Well, thank you for calling. We're gonna get some other callers on, but this was a really good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Oh, I know you dropped out there for a bit, Lloyd. What'd you miss?
It wasn't because of the philosophy.
You weren't just like, I'm bored. Boop.
The bunker is beset by technical problems, but hopefully I'm here for the duration now. So apologies about that.
All right. We don't have any more theist callers on the line, which is disappointing, but I will get to our caller who has been on the line for quite a while now. Joshua in Portugal. How are you?
Hello, hello. Well, I didn't think I'd get on. Hello? Hello?
Hi. We can hear you.
Oh, good. Hello, I'm honored to be on this talk show. Sorry, I'm a little nervous.
That's okay. Breathe, Joshua.
Right.
Breathe.
Yep.
It's just Rudy Bee and Lloyd Evans here to take your question.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just a couple of schmucks on the internet. Don't worry.
Like, I'm calling in because I recently had to talk with someone, and she doesn't really understand what atheism is, and it's been very, how do I say, difficult to get what to explain to her. Would you have any advice on how to talk to her about that sort of thing?
Well, how has the conversation gone so far? Like, what is her not understanding look like?
Well, she thinks that people like, I shouldn't say all atheists, but she thinks that atheists are religious in the sort of way. She says because I think it's the misnomer that the atheism is people who don't believe in a God, but they believe the correct terminology is a lack of belief in God, if I'm correct.
It depends on who you ask. I mean, that is entirely, it's, you can look at different definitions. The way that I use the word, certainly, I'm not excluding the possibility of a God, because as I mentioned earlier in the show, if somebody gave me all the proof that a deistic God did indeed have to have created the earth, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. Just as long as you can show me the evidence, I am open to it. So it depends on who's using the term, really.
Well, when I used the term, I was just saying that it's that I don't accept the claim that there is a God, but I am open to it. But she called me agnostic, but I'm technically an agnostic atheist. So how would you say would be the best way to explain to her the points of atheism? Because she has the same arguments that a lot of other theists have about atheists.
It's difficult without being actually in the conversation. And, when you're in the moment and you're hearing the specific arguments, you're in a stronger position to, suggest what you might or might not say. But when it comes to atheism being a religion, I would ask if your friend is familiar with, straw manning. And I'd suggest that a more productive way of making progress in your conversation is for them to accurately understand what atheism is. And when you accurately understand what atheism is, you realize that it cannot be a religion. It's the exact opposite of a religion. It's lack of religion. It's lack of religious beliefs. So I would only suggest that in order to make progress, probably your friend might need to understand more accurately where you're coming from.
Yes, because she's also this one other person is that she's also the one that says that, like, she thinks like I know I shouldn't be. She's the person who thinks that magic is like actual magic, like the things from fantasy and all those things.
No, we've been there. Trust us.
It's hard for me to try and explain it to her, because if I try to explain to her, I might sound like I'm being a killjoy or I'm being an asshole. Yeah. Can I say that on my air? Is that okay?
Yeah, you're fine. Joshua, have you always been an atheist, or did you come from a religious background yourself?
No, I was never. My parents never raised me religious. They wanted me to be my own person, and I've never did. And even when I was young, I never bought into the idea of a God, because if a God really did exist, why would he create such pain and misery for everyone else? If God truly was a loving being, he would have not caused us this much suffering in this world.
Yeah, that might be part of where your roadblock is. It's because I know as a theist that there was definitely a time when I thought that God was the default position that just made the most sense. So it's hard. It was I caught on pretty quickly, like, okay, I understand what atheist means, but it was new information. Like, before that, I hadn't really considered what an atheist was or what that meant. So from her perspective, presumably, again, we're not in the conversation, but from her perspective, it's like, probably most of the people around her are theists. Most people believe in a God or some sort of spiritual higher power thing. And depending on the religion she has been raised in, she may have her own preconceived ideas of what an atheist is and what they believe and what they're like. Even without being directly like atheists are bad people, there's certainly a lot of ideas, at least that are preached in Christian apologist circles, about how atheists just want to sin, or atheists are mostly just homosexuals who couldn't be celibate. They just couldn't do it, so they went and decided to just not believe in a God, or they were mad at God for whatever reason. Maybe something broke bad in their life, and they just gave up on the concept of God because he wasn't doing enough favors for them. There's all sorts of preconceptions and baggage that she's probably coming into this conversation with. You really just need to explain yourself. Like, forget about what you've heard about atheists, forget about even the word atheist. This is my belief system, or lack thereof. Like, this is what it is. And at that point, if you don't just take me for my word, then I really don't know what to tell you, because you've already convinced yourself that I'm not telling you the truth, I guess.
That's fair enough. Thank you. One other thing, if I can say something, I also had some bad experiences because I'm autistic, you see, and when I was one of a religious school, I think it was also contributed to this. They called me demonically possessed when I was younger. And I got autism.
Yeah, I'm sure that didn't help you want to become religious. I'm sure that didn't help.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, it didn't.
Well, I'm so sorry you went through that.
Oh, it's no worries. It wasn't the best. But I appreciate... Lloyd, I'm sorry, I forgot your names.
Lloyd and Rudy.
Lloyd and Rudy. Thank you two so much for taking my call. I appreciate it greatly. You two are awesome, and you're doing a great service for people who are atheistic and who don't have a voice. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for calling.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
It's
a good call.
And we say in Portugal, ciao.
Ciao. Oh, what a lovely call, except for that bit about, oh God, mental illness being equated with demonic possession is like one of those things that is instantly just a hot button, like will piss me off immediately. Ooh, that gets me fired up.
So much ignorance that religion has to account for, you know, and goodness knows what that will do when you're young, and how that will mess with your brain.
Well, I'm glad he didn't buy into it.
Yeah.
I'm glad that he didn't buy into it. So now it is time for us to announce the patrons of the week. Our top 5 patrons are, drum roll for myself, Eric Tweet, CJ Dennis, Dingleberry Jackson, Balaam's Donkey, Paul, Leah, and of course, honorary mention, the great North American Dingaloo. Thank you, guys. And again, if you guys want to support us on Patreon, go to patreon.com/Talk Heathen to me. It is a great help for not only this show, but all the ACA's productions. So, Lloyd, you remember how at the beginning of the show I teased a little special announcement?
You did. And I am on tenterhooks.
No, you're not, but okay. You already know what it is. So I am so honored to be the one to announce this, but Lloyd Evans, the amazing, fabulous, wonderful person that he is going to be in the regular host rotation for Talk Heathen now as well. So you're going to be seeing a lot more of him. This is his last time being a guest. Next time he's going to have to pull his own weight.
Wow, there are those rings. I've heard of these. Yay! Mythical things.
The love rings.
The love rings
out for you. I'm so happy to have you on board.
I'm blown away. Look, I've always been a massive fan of the ACA. I love how inclusive it is. I love how it facilitates conversation and discourse. I think that in this precise moment in history, where there is so much bigotry and so little kindness and respect, I think you need to have conversations. I think you need to keep those conversations coming. And the ACA, for me, have been at the forefront of that over the last few years. And I was immensely honored to be involved in, I think so far, 1 Talk Heathen and 2 Atheist Experience shows. And they've always been enjoyable. And if I can replicate a fraction of the success of amazing people like Rudy and other hosts who have been before me, I would be absolutely thrilled. But anything I can do to contribute to the ACA, I am always here. So it's a huge honor and thrill to be invited back to as a host of future shows. That's fantastic.
And we are delighted to have you. And literally, as soon as I saw your name on the schedule, I contacted Katie. Was like, Katie, please let me host Lloyd. Please. I have to do it. So I was thrilled just to be able to make the announcement, honestly. And I'm totally happy to have you on board with us.
Although I now know I need to buy a generator because I'm not having this shit happen again. Sorry, I'm not having this happen again with the power going out.
You can swear.
I can. Oh, okay. I can't swear on my own channel, but I can swear here. That's fine. That's fine by me.
You can talk politics on your channel and swear on this one.
That's fair, I think.
All right, let us take another caller. We need more theists on the line. I know there isn't a lot left to the show, but I want to get one more theist caller in before the end of the show.
Shall I try and summon one? I do have this power. I haven't used it yet. Does that work?
Is it the Force?
Yeah, exactly.
Still looks like just atheists. Oh, well.
Damn it. I need to practice. Practice with some rocks.
In a swamp.
Yeah.
Jim in Canada, you are calling and want to talk about an experience when you were a believer. How are you today?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you. Pretty good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Welcome, Jim.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep, we can hear you just fine.
Yeah, just good. I'm going to give you a little bit of my background and history. I'm in my 60s, late 60s. I didn't grow up in a particularly religious household. I was a Baptist because my grandmother was, but I never really was a believer. I always had sort of existential angst, sort of in my late teens, early 20s. And I came across the Charismatic Renewal, which was a Catholic kind of, I don't know if you're familiar with that sort of movement.
I love reading about fundies, so yeah, I've heard of them.
Anyway, so I became involved in this sort of prayer group, and it was all about ecstatic, singing, praising the Lord, and maybe speaking in tongues. I think I faked speaking in tongues, but anyway, as a believer, I always sort of struggled with my own logic, and I also struggled with guilt around sexuality a lot of the time, because you were in your prime of your life, but at the same time you weren't supposed to have, you weren't supposed to be sexual or have sexual thoughts even.
You're preaching to the choir, Jim.
So, yeah. Anyway, so then around, I became a Catholic. I mean, I was like, when I was about 20, because it was at that time in my life, because of the existential angst I was experiencing, I met a community of young people about my age, and it was like a family, like there was love was in the air sort of thing. Everybody was happy, and I was in a folk group and all this kind of stuff. It was a positive experience for me at the time. I became a Catholic from that. Over time, I just sort of my faith became eroded. I would sort of blame the institutional church, the Catholic Church itself, blame it on for example, the role of women in the church. Why can't women be priests? Why do priests have to be celibate? So I'd sort of I would sort of look at that critically, but at the same time, I kind of hold on to my own sort of belief. So my atheism was a gradual kind of thing, but I don't know if I struggle with it at all, but there was one thing that happened when I was in around 2021, and this charismatic, and this part of this charismatic renewal thing. There was a couple of people. The charismatic Catholics were influenced a lot by Pentecostals, and the idea of deliverance, having evil spirits and things like this. So there was this couple from the United States. I'm a Canadian. A couple from the United States came, and they were talking about deliverance. Unclean. They were talking about the people who had unclean spirits and this sort of thing and other thing. So I was struggling at that time, just with my belief and also with sexualdy. And these husband and wife team, they were praying over me and says, "Oh, he's got a spirit of unclean spirit and a spirit of defiance or belligerence or something like that, right?" And so they were there for a couple of days, 2 or 3 days. So one evening was at this sort of it was a deliverance kind of thing. I was sitting in the chair and everybody was praying over me, laying on hands sort of thing, and
been there many times.
Yeah. Anyway, this was an experience that I won't forget. Like it was an experience, like I was thrown back. I felt thrown back in my chair that I was sitting in. I was resisting this whole thing, thrown back, and I felt this energy, literally this energy sort of coursing through my body, And the only other time I had experienced something similar to that was when I was probably my first orgasm, but not to that extent. And another time when I was in therapy, I had a kind of a screwed up childhood. I got lots of baggage from childhood.
Don't we all?
But yeah. And I was with this therapist, and I was dealing with my father issues. And I was like banging on slapping a pillow, and there was this sort of a rage out, It was mostly around my father. Anyway, so I felt that was another time, and I sort of had this sort of electrical, energetic sort of jolt or energy in my body sort of thing. So, so I just, that initial experience sort of, caused me to not to sort of believe in God, since then, because I've been doing quite a bit of research, and I've been listening to somebody like Matt Dillahunty on YouTube, and I'm just, amazed in him and Dave Warnock and those people who really, have helped, really have had that sort of experience and talk about it, from their perspective, and really sort of helped people in a lot of ways. But I'm just wondering I don't know if you guys can relate to this. I mean, you mentioned you are Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't know if you guys had these kinds of, I don't know what to call them. These kinds of
Lloyd, I don't know about you. Did you ever, did you guys ever sit around and talk shit about Pentecostals?
I don't know about Pentecostals. Maybe born again Christians. That was they were kind of the enemy in the UK for our branch of the religion. But that's really interesting. I think I relate more to the sexual repression, and certainly Rudy will relate to the sexual repression element more than the kind of euphoric situation. And by the way, well done for doing research on that, because that's the sort of thing where when you have an experience, it's sort of near and dear to your heart. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've had a caller on before who was kind of leaning on personal experience to some degree, at least, as a reason for belief. And I think that it says a lot about you and your intellectual honesty if you're willing to kind of re-examine these episodes in your life and think, what caused that? This happened. What's the explanation? There must be an explanation. And Matt is brilliant when it comes to stuff like stage shows and magic tricks, and he's a student of all that stuff. So it doesn't surprise me that he's come up with some really interesting insights, probably more insights than I can offer. But no, I don't relate to that element, but I can say quite a bit on sexual repression, as I'm sure Rudy can.
Yeah, I actually did have a sort of experience of my own, I guess, where I sort of felt like I prayed and something happened that I felt. I was supposed to give I had a talk for the witness audience, but for anybody else, it would be like an onstage demonstration of how to preach. Was basically what I had to do, and I was a kid, and I was so nervous. I know now that I have anxiety. I didn't know at the time. But I was extremely nervous, and I prayed over and over and over again for peace and calm, peace and calm. And as soon as I stepped onto the stage, I felt like I was just awash with calm. Like all of a sudden, all of the jitters were like sucked out of my body. And that's something that I can't forget happened. That happened. But the thing is now, though, it's like, it's not like it's impossible to feel calm. I've done it other times when I was nervous about something, and then once I started doing it, it just kind of went away. It felt profound because I prayed about it, but it's not like that has never happened to me without prayer. It's not like it doesn't happen to other people, and it's, and especially in your case, in an environment, where people are expecting a big reaction and they're clearly making a big deal and they expect to see something happen. And you are presumably buying into what's happening around you. I mean, you believed that what they were going to do was going to work, right? So you're in this, you're in a state, you're in a mental state, a mental and emotional state that is not the norm. There's basically, I totally get where you're coming from as far as like thinking about that and being like, I do not feel like I have an explanation for that. That's still, I don't think it came from a god, but to this day, that is bizarre. Totally get that. But it's not like a miracle happened. You just had a really weird feeling. And weird feelings can happen for lots of reasons.
A weird feeling in a room full of frenzied people, probably with your eyes closed, I'm guessing. And, the brain's a complicated thing. The brain is a very complicated thing, and manipulate it in the right way. It doesn't surprise me that you can have some very euphoric experiences in that sort of setting. So,
yeah.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to, I've never really talked to anybody much about this sort of thing, but I just found it perplexing. And I know that there are parts of the brain that, I don't know a lot about the brain, but I know that the physical brain, they're learning so much about it, that can create different sort of euphoric experiences and so forth.
Wouldn't it be great if we could tap into it just like that? I want to feel euphoric. Let me press a button. Oh, now I'm feeling. That would be fantastic. Maybe
I'm pretty sure that's what the Tantra people are doing. They just think that it's something else.
I need some of that energy, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for the call. And I hope that, getting to chat about this a little bit gave you a different perspective.
It did. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye for
Yeah.
now.
I know that maybe it wasn't anything that big, but did you ever have any sort of smaller experiences as a witness praying for something to happen or something like that?
No. I've heard your experience, and I've been in that situation when you've been on an assembly platform or even on a Kingdom Hall platform, and it's a big deal, and you do feel nervous. So I can imagine what it would have felt like for you, praying and praying and praying, and oh, now I'm calm. I wish I could have channeled that during some of my talks and what have you, but no, I've not had that in that particular setting. But I think all of us can think back on times in our lives when, weird things have happened. It's just that when people investigate these claims, they always find a scientific reason for it. And most of the weird stuff that's happened in my life has been when I've been semi-conscious, at nighttime, when my cognitive abilities are impaired, and that tends to be when people relate their experiences of demonic possession and that kind of thing. Isn't it interesting that these demons always appear at nighttime when people are half asleep and prone to hallucination?
Yeah, interesting how they keep doing that. That's so weird.
Indeed.
I have been reminded to remind you all that another way that you could support the ACA and this show is just to donate at the fundraiser it's not in the chat. It's either like above the chat or below. I don't remember.
It's in the vicinity of the chat.
It's somewhere on your screen, and the YouTube doesn't get a cut of it. So that is another way you can just donate directly. So yeah, that is another awesome way you can support us. All right, we got a couple more calls. Let's talk to Jessie. Who wants to know what makes some people subscribe to more susceptible to subscribing to extreme religions as opposed to others. Jessie, can you hear us?
Yes.
All right. Hi. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So basically that's what I was referring to. Because I have a mother who is an independent Baptist, and even though she's kind of I would say softened over the years and isn't quite as firebrand as she used to be, she never really grew up with fundamentalist religion. Her mother just kind of went to different churches and stuff, and nothing ever really stuck. But she enrolled in an independent church when I was probably 8 or 9, and my sister was 4, and my sister is really kind of brainwashed and trapped in that religion now. And I guess I was wondering, I know my mother had a very traumatic childhood, but what causes someone who's not indoctrinated themselves and isn't really conditioned to believe that stuff later in life? Yes, she's had traumatic experiences, but my question is, why not gravitate to a little bit more loving, compassionate type of Christianity versus why would someone want to cling on to a very oppressive, fundamentalist religion? If you're not conditioned to really believe that stuff to begin with?
I would suggest it's because the fundamentalist religions tend to be more pushy and tend to be more, we have all the answers. The more
There's
mainstream,
a level of certainty.
Indeed.
comes along with it. That
the mainstream religions tend to be a little bit more, oh, we're inclusive, we're interfaith, you know, come and worship with us if you want. If you don't want to, that's fine. You know, fundamentalist Baptists are by definition fundamentalist, and you know, your mother's pastor will have been saying things like, you know, here at my church we have the answers. You've had a traumatic childhood. I'm here to tell you why that's happened, and I'm here to tell you how you can get over it. And this is how it's worked in all manner of cults. They target people who have had traumatic backgrounds. They target people who have been through pain and misery, and they come and present the solution. So it's called exploiting emotional vulnerability. That's how cults basically work. That's their modus operandi. And, you know, I can understand it's frustrating. It's frustrating for me because that's how they roped my parents in. But it is extremely successful. Fortunately, in the internet age, it's getting harder and harder for them to do that because, for example, cults like Jehovah's Witnesses, you can debunk their beliefs in just a few clicks on Google. I don't know what it's like for the particular church that your mother's involved in, but it's getting harder and harder I think, for cults to dupe people in the information age. But certainly when you would have been young, there would have been fewer resources for your mother to call upon in engaging critical thinking and debunking some of this stuff that she was sold.
Mm-hmm. They also tend to have a very strong, although strict, sense of community involved in these more strict religions, because they at least a lot of the ones that I'm aware of enforce this sort of idea that because this group of people is the only ones that have the truth, you really shouldn't be hanging out with anybody else. So it's like you have community by default. You have people who supposedly are there for you and understand you and are in your corner by default. You don't even have to work to have those relationships. They are just there. And that is something that people who have been through trauma need, is support, is people. And a tight-knit community isn't always something that is easy to find in a more laid back, I guess is the word for it, religious community, because people are a lot more free to come and go as they please. There's no rule about associating with each other after the meeting. There's no expectation of people to reach out to each other. It's like, if you do, that's great. But, you know, within at least the cult that we grew up in, there's a very strong emphasis on cultivating a community. Whether or not these are actually people you want to be around or get along with, you'd better. So it's really easy to find people to support you in a community like that.
Right. And I totally get that, because, I mean, I've seen where the church did do that, or they would prey on people's vulnerabilities and try to get them involved in the church and be super kind at first. And then they start like dropping, you know, like the harder truths and stuff over time. But my thing is, I don't know why she keeps going back, because she had, I mean, I guess it could be years of brainwashing, but like her first experience after we joined the church, she didn't really get along with everybody. And she's the type of person, even though she believes a lot of this, if she's mad at someone or she thinks they're being a jerk, she's going to tell them off. So she always kind of made waves in the church, and they would tell her like things like how she wasn't supposed to divorce my father and how she wasn't supposed to do this and that. She did these things anyways. And then after fighting with them for years, she goes back to another church, and all the guy has to say is, oh, yeah, no, I think it's okay. I think you had grounds for divorcing your husband. We're not like that here. They believe all the same things. And it's like, it's almost like, I don't know. It's like she keeps returning to the same people that have failed her. And it's like, I like, a lot of that makes sense. But it's like, what is holding you to them? Like, they weren't the best community for her. So that's what
it's an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
It's pretty, and it is difficult to explain from an outsider's perspective. There's really no, that's the simplest answer, is that it is an abusive relationship that is extended to a larger group of people. That's what controlling cult-like groups do. So it is hard to get away, even if you know it's not good for you or it makes you miserable. But
Yeah.
we have a couple other calls on the line that I want to try to get to before we wrap up. But thank you for calling in, and I hope that our perspectives sort of gave you a little bit more clarity there.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jessie.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
All right, we got 2 more calls to get through. Let's do it. Laura, can you hear us?
Hi. Yes.
Hi, Laura.
Rudy and Lloyd. Hi, I'm big fans of both of yours. Rudy, I've only seen you a couple of times, but I think you're amazing and you're doing a great job of taking over the Talk Heathen hosting. I think you're amazing. Lloyd,
you.
I'm subscribed to your show.
Thank you. Well, thank you for subscribing.
All of the Jehovah's Witnesses content that you put out. So I was really curious to ask you both, since you're both Jehovah's Witnesses and I don't know much about them, could you please explain what were your both your experiences of leaving it and how did it differ from each other's? And I'd be very interested to hear about that, please.
As for the actual content of our leaving, Lloyd's written a book. I've made a video on the subject. It's, I can safely say for both of us, it is way more than we would have time for in the whole show, let alone the last 15 minutes or so. But hopefully the chat will direct people to Lloyd's book and to my video that I made about leaving. So definitely check those out. But as far as
congratulations to you both, and I'm a big fan. And so, what are you saying?
Just as far as the differences between our leaving, I think that we both know enough about each other's stories that we could probably highlight some things. Like, for example, Lloyd left the religion as a married adult, and I was just barely an adult. Still, I lived with my parents when I was about to leave, so that's a pretty major difference. He'd certainly been in the religion a lot longer than I had.
It's like a cult, isn't it?
It's not like a cult, it is a cult.
Yep.
It is a cult, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a big rabbit hole that you need to go down, Laura, and it's all there on Rudy's excellent channel. And you're familiar with my channel, and I have a book as well. So it's all there waiting for you. So good hunting.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, and have a good day.
Thank you, Laura.
You too. Thank you. I wish we could have gotten more into it, but it's like that's it's so much. It's so much. I mean, in the video that I made, I literally started from like, this is my childhood, because you need to know pretty much my entire cult upbringing to bring you to when I left and why. And
it's kind of an ongoing story, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. I mean, I just had a text from my mom the other day, which I feel like was like, if I was to write a book today, that would be in it now. But if I had written it yesterday, that wouldn't be in it. Like, my mom texted me and was like, I'm sorry for the way that I brought you up damaged you mentally and emotionally. I don't regret bringing you up as a Jehovah's Witness, because I still believe that's the best way of life. But, I know I could have done better. And I was like, holy shit. Thank you.
That's a big deal, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not that I wouldn't expect that. If I expected it from anybody in my family, I guess it would be my mom. But it was still like, that was nice to hear. Thank you.
I would. There's a lot I would pay to hear my dad say that. Put it that way. I think you've looked out there, and it also hints at some conflict, I think. So who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? All right, we have one more caller on the line, another person from the UK, and he is calling in about one of my very favorite subjects to talk about. Richard, can you hear us?
Hello. I can.
Excellent.
It's like the English takeover tonight, isn't it? I think Lloyd's like attracting us all.
I think you've given me an idea there. I think we may need to have a UK invasion for a future Talk Heathen. Who knows? We'll see.
We've already had a Canadian invasion on the atheist experience, so why not?
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about a lot of people in our community, the atheist community, talk about when they're referring to religions, they say all religions are cults. Now, you two are from a cult background, and I want to know what your perspective is on the difference between a traditional religion and a dangerous cult.
This is my exact soapbox. So thank you so much, Richard, for calling with this exact question. I've made videos about this. I have jumped in the live chat to correct people on this. Not all religions are cults. Oh my God, they're not. What I would give to have been raised in a religion that was not a cult. I mean, the differences are staggering. For one thing, most of the time, the vast majority of the time, if I tell your run-of-the-mill Christian about my Christian upbringing, they're like, oh my God, what the fuck? That's so messed up. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I know it was messed up. I was in a cult. And they can't relate to any of those experiences because they haven't experienced them, because I was in a cult and they weren't. And that's just an experience thing. But like, you know, if you want to bring in the bite model, that's a really good example. There are just so many levels of control and secrecy and manipulation that don't exist to the degree, at the very least, in most major religions, mainstream religions, that exist in cults. I mean, you know, like I'm pretty sure the Catholics don't have a secret book that only priests are allowed to read, and that if anybody else wrote it, they could get excommunicated from the church. Like, this stuff is not a universal experience. And to act as if all religions are cults in the same way is like, no, because first of all, it completely diminishes the experience of actual cult survivors. Because, like I said, if I could have been raised in a mainstream religion, oh my God, I would totally have chosen that, because it would have made my life better. My life was worse as a result of being in a cult. And that's not to say that people don't feel like shame and manipulation and things like that in other religions, but largely those come from the specific people who are practicing and teaching the religion and enforcing it. It could come from family. It could come from a particularly terrible pastor or something like that. But in a cult, it's the whole group. They all do that. The people that don't are the exceptions. It's okay. I'm gonna breathe.
Are you okay there, Rudy? You okay? Just need a moment.
Yeah, this is just one of those topics that always gets me going. And I'm glad that I get to have my my little soapbox moment. But I'm sure you have ideas to contribute to this as well, Lloyd.
I do. I just don't want to upset you because they're slightly different. That they are, broadly speaking, the same. Look, I think cult is a problematic word. I think it's a word that doesn't really advance the conversation. And I think, yes, when we're speaking about groups that aren't directly inflicting damage on people, the word cult is useless, essentially. But I have a slightly unorthodox view on this, which is to say that I think that if you take the most benign group, religious group imaginable, and you know, what would that look like? So let's say you have a group that says, right, we absolutely need to give money to poor people. That's our religious dogma, because there is a giant rabbit in the sky that tells us that we need to do this. This giant rabbit created all things, and this giant rabbit insists that we give money to poor people. So that's what we're going to do. So imagine you had a group like that, and the result was that poor people got given money. It would be a good thing. The bad thing would be that people would be believing there's a giant rabbit in the sky that created all things. And this belief would be passed on to children. And so children would be given wrong information. They would be indoctrinated. And I think all religions are guilty to varying degrees of child indoctrination, which I think is harmful. I think it's a detrimental thing to do to a child, to fill their head with things that aren't true as though they're true. And so on that basis, I think that there are such things as soft cults. Again, it's problematic to use the word cult when you have a soft cult, because they're nowhere near the level of damage that Rudy's just been pointing out. But then you have extreme cults. And at the furthest end of the scale, we can point to cults that are literally going around and killing people that aren't part of their group. But somewhere in the middle, you have groups like the group that Rudy and I have emerged from, that are keeping secret databases of child molesters and breaking apart families through shunning and persuading people to die rather than accept blood. And when you have that situation, I think that's where the word cult is needed. It's not just justified, it's actually necessary to use that word. But I personally don't use the word cult when I'm talking about groups where there is far less control, as identified through the bite model, which Rudy alluded to. Rudy, does that sort of sound reasonable, or are we?
Yeah, no, I would not disagree with that at all. I get that, you know, words have multiple meanings, and on a broader definition, it's not wrong to say that religion, that cult can be a variation of the word religion and vice versa. It's just that when we're talking about extreme cults, when we're having this conversation about cults, we need to be clear, and we can't muddy the water with groups that are nowhere near as bad. That's what exactly. And so it's like when people throw around the word cult to describe pretty much any run-of-the-mill religion, it's like, wait, why would you say that? Because that doesn't match with, you know, what in my experience of being a cult survivor, it just doesn't make sense. Like, and I get that people who have not been in cults may not understand that and may feel like I'm just like policing language or whatever, but I feel like it muddles the definition, or it muddles the meaning of the word if we're just going to call any old religion a cult. Because I don't even think
renders the word useless, doesn't it? If you paint with too broad a brush. Yeah.
Right. Because I don't even think that all cults are necessarily religions. I've seen like yoga instruction groups that turned into cults, you know. Any high control group can be labeled as a cult, because that's more what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking of a cult. I'm not thinking about just the religion aspect of it, that you're worshiping something. I'm thinking about the control aspect of it. That is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a cult. So now that we've been ranting and raving for a little while, Richard.
Would we say in relation to the bite model that if we were to take it as a very loose thing, we could apply some of those aspects to any organization, schools, or just normal churches? Or
it doesn't have to be a religion. It doesn't have to be a religion. It could be a political cult. It could be human trafficking. It could be an insurance scam. You name it. You can take, arguably even politics. You could take almost any sphere of human interest, and you could use those elements of cult control identified in Stephen Hassan's bite model and use them to essentially take over someone's mind. That's the scary thing about cults, is that they are a real thing. And even though many people watching this show may think that they are Superman, they're impervious to cult influence, all it takes, as we've learned in one of the calls on this show, is for someone to be at the wrong point in their life or to have dark memories from their childhood. And cults know how to prey upon those opportunities.
Yeah. And with what you were saying about sort of loosely applying the bite model to just about anything, you know, that's the reason that I consider it a tool and not like the end all be all of what is and is not a cult. But it's a very good tool. It's a very useful one. But if you apply it loosely to anything, yeah, you can be like, okay, well, this fits a couple of criteria. But that's why there's so many criteria on there. And there are varying degrees of how much something may or may not apply. You know, you could say, oh, okay, well, they have, you know, there could be one group that's just like, you know, like one of the criteria is like they, you know, the group might interrupt your sleep. It might control how much sleep you get. And there might be one group that just has kind of a strict rule in it about going to bed and waking up at a certain time, and that technically qualifies. But there are also other groups that are pretty much like you have to basically drink 5-hour energy every single day just to move on because of how hard they're working you or how much they expect you to do. You know, so there's varying degrees of how much a group might fit the criteria in the bite model, and that also has to be considered because, you know, like I said, both of those could technically apply under that same criteria, but I would consider one much more likely to be a cult than the other. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Richard, did you get more than you bargained for in asking that question?
No. I'm really interested in cult survivors and things anyway, so I just wanted to, having you both on the show together at the same time, I thought it was a good opportunity to ask you both your opinions on the subject.
Yeah.
Our
well,
absolute pleasure.
thank you for setting up that soapbox and handing me the mic. I appreciate it. All right, well, have a good one. That's
going to make a really good outtake, by the way. Little clip.
Yeah.
That's going to get loads of views. So thank you.
Oh, probably. Well, that is all the calls we had today. Lloyd, how did you enjoy yourself as much as I did?
I didn't enjoy the power cut. That was that was deeply unenjoyable. But apart from that, it's been an absolute blast. And thank you for being with me, Rudy.
Well, thank you for being with me.
I hope I've done you at least some justice in being your sidekick. And yeah, thank you very much. You took those calls magnificently.
Ah, thank you. And I believe you did as well. And let's put some love out into the world. Let's get some love rings out there. 3, 2, 1.
We need to study these love rings. Can we get some science on these?
What they're made of.
We need more answers on these love rings. No one really understands their origins, but they're here.
And it means that we have a really cool audience. I know that much. So again, ways that you can support us and this show and the ACA in general: become a member, click the join button. You'll get some cool little perks. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Talk Heathen to me. And if you're one of the top contributors to our Patreon, you'll get your name read out like the other people did in the middle of the show. So that's pretty cool. Of course, if, again, for some reason you don't want to see our beautiful faces, but you do want to listen to the show, you can find all of the ACA shows in podcast form on tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. So check that out if you're more of a podcast person. You can also join us on our fan-run Facebook group, which is pretty active. We're always doing polls and posts and stuff there all the time. So hang out with us there at facebook.com/groups/talkheathenfg. And if you want to join Lloyd and I after the show for a little after show follow-up on Discord, please join us at tiny.cc/ACA Discord. And that is the fan-run ACA Discord. And of course, after that, if we're running on time, hopefully you will catch the Nonprofits, which is coming out at, what time is? I have to do the math because I'm not on Central Time Zone. It's 3 p.m. Central, but if you're me, it's 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and that's at youtube.com/the Nonprofits ACA. So definitely check out that show. And of course, before we go, we have to thank the amazing people who run this stuff behind the scenes.
Look at all these beautiful people. Look at them.
Yes, let's go to the crew cam.
Wow.
Oh, there they are. There's the beautiful
Those
people.
are some fine specimens, aren't they?
Martin, where's your cat? Martin, where's your cat?
Yeah, there's a shortage of felines. We need to fix that.
Look at that beautiful mask.
We need to have just a cat on one of the cameras, just for no apparent reason.
We used to, but we don't. Vern used to have a camera specifically for his cat. Oh, there we go. There is the crew cat cam.
Come on.
Look at the kitties. All right. That's what we want to see. Thank you, crew, for bringing back
this will double the monetization, surely.
Absolutely. We better get more donations. So, believe it or not, the pandemic is still kind of a thing. Some people have seemed to kind of just forget about that. But if you're not vaccinated yet, please continue to wear a mask. If you are fully vaccinated, I guess the choice is up to you, but it's technically still safer to wear a mask. I'm fully vaccinated. Woohoo! Lloyd, are you fully vaccinated?
Halfway there. I've got my first Pfizer.
Halfway there.
Waiting for the second one. Yeah.
Everybody go get vaccinated. And thank you so much to the people who already have. You guys are doing your part. Just trying to get this shit back together. If you're not a believer, this is your community. It's not just for ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, believe it or not. You guys are all welcome here, and we'd love to continue our conversations about cults and religious trauma, and then also just kind of hanging out together and feeling each other's support. That's something I'm always down for, is just people supporting other people. And of course, if you do believe, we don't hate you. We're just not convinced.
Just not convinced.